The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday, February 16th. Thanks for joining me. It's a little early, I know, for some of you, but this is kind of the regular hour of these shows, or more closely to regular hour. There is no regular hour. What am I talking about? Anyway, I will be, as you know, I will be traveling next week for 2 weeks. I'm not committing to exactly when the shows will be. We'll try to have them on. They'll be much more convenient for Europeans than for Americans. But I'll try to do as many shows as I can while I'm traveling. It'll, of course, depend on internet quality and just on how busy I am, flights, things like that. So, you know, a lot of the shows might land up being at 2 a.m. your time, and you'll have to catch them later. I expect to see a decline in Super Chat as a consequence, unless the Europeans really, really, really pick it up. And we'll see. We'll see. All right, a few other things, just announcements. You remember tonight we've got Alex Epstein at 7 p.m. East Coast time. We'll talk about just his book. Primarily, we'll talk about the reception of the book. We'll talk about a critique of the book that Tyler Cowen, the economist, well-known economist, has written, and what the issues are with that review. But we'll talk generally about the future of energy. But most, I want to talk quite a bit about the reception the book has gotten, the influence the book is having, what Alex sees as the positives out there, and then also, you know, kind of the intellectual resistance to it, the intellectual embrace, but also the intellectual resistance to it, and what that says about, if you will, our opponents. So I think it'd be a terrific show. So join us for Alex. And then finally, just to remind everybody that a sponsor of the show is the Ayn Rand University. You can go to university.aynrand.org and sign up for classes. Objectivism through Ayn Rand's fiction is one coming up with Ankar Gate. It's a terrific course. You'll get to relive your experience reading the novels, while delving deeper into the philosophical content of the novel. So I think you'll all have a good time, particularly those of you who are relatively new to objectivism will benefit enormously from this, but I think anybody would. You can either sign up as a full student, do homework, get graded, have exams, or you can sign up as an auditor. Either way, I think it'll be a fantastic experience. And just to remind you, I'll be teaching a course this summer on public speaking. If any of you would like to participate, you can sign up there as well. Yeah, let's make my course the highest attendance ever. So Yaron Brook fans, go sign up for my public speaking course as auditors, as students. Let's blow this out of the water. I need a raise from the Institute, so I want to be able to claim my course is driving admissions. All right. So you can get more information at university.aynrand.org. If you have any questions about the course, then please email me or email the Ayn Rand Institute if you have any questions about any of the courses there, or if you're just not sure whether this is appropriate for you, feel free to ask, and happy to let you know. All right, let's see. Let's jump in. So U.S. economy. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be talking about this regularly as data comes out. I mean, the data is conflicting, and it is all over the place, and it's hard to really tell. This is to suggest to you that economics in terms of actual prediction, and economics in terms of actual understanding of what is going on in the world is really, really, really hard. Really, really, really hard. And one can make general comments about, you know, the government regulates more, so the economy's not going to do as well. But how that manifests itself, how long of a time it takes to manifest itself, how that just plays out over time. Very, very, very difficult to tell. And the same with regard to inflation. All that stimulus during COVID resulted in inflation. How does that inflation play out? How long does it last? How high does it get? All very, 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 very very difficult, very complex, very hard. Thomas reminds me that I said the same thing. It wasn't 15 years ago. My investing course was 1998. It was 24 years ago. So yes, I haven't changed my mind about this because I think objectivists and many free market economists have a very simplistic attitude towards economics. They read von Mises or they read, I don't know, some economic newsletter, and they think, okay, they can now predict exactly what's going to happen in the economy. They can now predict exactly how things are going to play out economically because they've read a little bit, or they read Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. And if you read Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, you just know, you don't need more than that, right? And I'm just here to say much more complicated than that. And for a reason that Hayek talks about it, for a reason that it's just, there's so much data, there's so much information, and it all connects and it's all interconnected. There's just, and it's hard to translate data into theory. One of the points the Austrian economists make is economics is not mathematical, but to really understand what's going on, one has to be able to translate the data into actual outcomes. So, for example, today we had a much higher level of the producer price index. The producer price index is the price index that businesses pay in the supply through the supply chain. Remember, the consumer price index, the CPI, is what you as a consumer pay. So producer price index rose significantly higher than what economists were expecting. That has made worries about higher interest rates, the Fed raising interest rates even higher, more real, which has driven the stock market, at least when it opened, down quite a bit. There's stories out there saying that Wall Street is generally underestimating how high interest rates are going to go, and there's some Fed comments, and there's just so much going on. And of course, you have central planning. Central planners, so not only do you have to estimate how the economy would evolve if you were left alone, but you have to estimate how the economy will evolve, how Fed Reserve will respond to the economy, how Congress will respond to the economy, or the Biden administration will respond to the economy, how that'll change the trajectory of the economy, resulting in other responses from central planners, which then, and so it's almost impossible. It does look like there's the beginning of real stress for what I've called in the past and what others have called zombie companies. There does seem to be some panic among companies that are looking to restructure their debt. There was $6.3 trillion of outstanding high yield and investment grade corporate bonds. So $6.3 trillion of corporate bonds overall that are due by the end of 2025, that have to be paid out by 2025. Usually, companies take out new debt in order to pay back for old debt, or at least a portion of it. A portion of it could be paid off with cash, but some of it is paid off by taking on more debt. Any new debt taken on to pay for the old debt is going to have higher interest rates, which creates a real concern. But also 6.3, it's not clear that there will be buyers at what rate. So companies are fearful right now. Because both they have to renew this debt on the one hand, but on the other hand, the economy's slowing. So cash flows might shrink. So and there's fear of a recession. So I'm still predicting a recession this year. I think it's going to hit. It's going to hit. It could be pretty bad. I don't think we're in a position to really evade and escape a recession, given all these numbers and all these parameters and everything that's going on. Interest rates are going to be significantly higher. The 10-year bond already today was up towards 3.8. It had gone below 3.5. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes above 4. And these companies that had to refinance their debt are going to struggle to refinance it at interest rates that are way, way above that because of the risk that is associated. Remember that the 10-year bond is a government bond and therefore is considered riskless. Once you add risk, interest rates could be 10, could be 8, 9, 10, 12%, and become very, very difficult to pay them off. So anyway, I think difficult economic times ahead. It is interesting that Bitcoin spiked up today. It's up, I can't remember what percentage it's up. Just in the last 24 hours, Bitcoin is up 8.3%. Doesn't make any sense to me. I would not be at all surprised if Bitcoin was significantly lower within a month or two or three. Given the hostility of regulators and the central bank and different other parts of the central planning infrastructure in our government to crypto, the increase in price really absolutely makes no sense. I also find it interesting that for the longest time, Bitcoin was highly correlated with the NASDAQ. That seems to have ended, and Bitcoin is up now 50% year to date, whereas the NASDAQ is up a lot less than that. I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think it's based on anything other than pure speculation. There's nothing, there's no there. Maybe there's some short covering, but once the shorts cover, then the question is what sustains these prices. It's not clear, particularly, and it's not just Bitcoin. If you look at a crypto index, CMC Crypto 200 is up today, although it's down in the last few minutes, and year to date, it's up 46%. This is in an environment where, crypto is under huge attack from regulators, huge attack from Congress, huge, they're going to be real struggles for a lot of these crypto companies to survive in the coming months and years. And yet, crypto stocks are through the roof. If Bitcoin was up and the rest of crypto was down, I would say maybe there's something going on here, because maybe if crypto and Ethereum were up and everything else was down, I would say this is interesting. Maybe what's happening is a flight to quality. That is, people are exiting those parts of the crypto world that are shaky, those parts of the crypto world that are susceptible to the government going afterwards, right, after them. And they're going to quality, which is Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are less susceptible to the government's attack right now. Then I would say this makes sense. But given that everything is up, it just seems to me that everything going up is a sign of just speculation and indeed going against any kind of fundamentals. All right, let's see. Anonymous user, thank you. Jacob, thank you. Jeff Bannister, thank you. Really appreciate you guys jumping in with some support for the show. We do have a goal of trying to raise $250 for every show, so take that into account. Anyway, again, a lot of mixed signals for the U.S. economy. Still, I see very little reason to change my estimate with regard to a likely recession. I guess in the end of the day, sooner rather than later, hard to tell when, but at this point, it looks like second to third quarter of this year, and something more, things more substantial. All right. Andrew says he's in another country and can't purchase Super Chat. So Andrew says he's putting in a IOU for $20. Okay. What do I think of Sarah Huckabee? I don't know much about Sarah Huckabee, but she was a major part of the Trump administration. That is a huge red flag and a huge negative. She's quite religious, very anti-abortion, which I'm obviously very much opposed to those positions. Generally, I'm just not impressed. I'm not impressed by her, and again, her affiliation with Trump and what she did with the Trump administration was not impressive. She is now the governor of Arkansas. We'll see what she does in Arkansas. A lot of Republican governors are doing some interesting things. We'll talk about that on another show. All right, quickly. Well, this is not so quick. This is not so much newsy, but I did come across today this study about the United States vis-a-vis versus China versus Russia. What makes for a powerful United States? What makes for a powerful world leader in a kind of a world in which there's, if you will, global competition over a vision and over economic and ultimately military competition. Who tends to win? And there is a Rand Corporation study that takes a look at this. They look at a lot of data, but they also look at history, and they consult with historians, and they consult with political scientists, and so on. And which is interesting. So this is more a gauge of the thinking of the, I'd say, mainstream world. The Rand Corporation should never be confused with the Ayn Rand Institute. Rand Corporation is very much a mainstream, conventional think tank type of organization. It is an organization that really presents kind of mainline thinking. And this study that was authored, I guess, by Michael J. Mazar, M-A-Z-A-R-R, and he published an article about the study in Foreign Affairs, which I read. And it basically says, okay, what characterizes a successful superpower, in a sense? What a successful country that can defend itself on a global scale, that can project its power, that can maintain its economic, cultural, and military competitiveness in the world out there. And they identify 7 characteristics. And it's interesting to see kind of the orientation that people have in terms of looking at these kind of characteristics and what they have and why they think America is in decline. So one is a driving national ambition. Now, of course, what does that even mean? What does it mean to have a driving national ambition? Did America have a driving national ambition when it rose to power in the 19th century, at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, when it became the dominant country in the world? Did it have a national ambition? I mean, maybe to be free, maybe to be left alone, maybe don't tread on me. But it's not what they mean. It's not what he means by a driving national, national ambition. Let me just, whoops, where's this? What he means by a driving national ambition is a sense of a national mission and greatness and a desire to influence world politics internally. It generates a national drive to learn, achieve, succeed in everything from scientific research and business, industry, and arts. I don't see the relationship there. I don't see between a national ambition and this drive to achieve, succeed. That's an internal ambition. That's a personal ambition. And to create a culture where people have this desire to learn, achieve, succeed, that's a different question. But I don't think that has to do with national ambition. I think it has to do with a culture of individual ambition. And the whole point of this article, which I'm going to have to dedicate a long show to this because this can't really be done in 5-10 minutes. We might skip through this. The whole point of this article is a completely collectivistic perspective. A completely collectivistic perspective. That is a perspective that is about what can be imposed from the top down. So second is shared opportunities for citizens, a common and coherent national identity, an active state, effective social institutions, that's true if understood properly, an emphasis on learning and adaptation, by whom? And significant diversity and pluralism. Now, a lot of these are true, certainly learning and adaptation, diversity and pluralism, good social institutions if you understand the right, like if you understand them in terms of private property and things like that. But an active state, the Soviet Union had a more active state than the United States, and it failed. A common and cohesive national identity is important. I actually think that's true. But I think that idea is not their idea, because they come at it from a purely collectivistic perspective. Ayn Rand comes at a common and cohesive national identity, or what she called national unity, from a completely individualistic perspective. He identifies the reason the U.S. beat the Soviet Union as, where is it? The United States ultimately prevailed over the Soviet Union in the Cold War because it was more energetic, innovative, productive, and legitimate. Yes, but why was it all those things? That's exactly the point. Why was it all those things? Why was it more energetic, innovative? What made it possible for the United States to be more energetic, innovative, productive, and legitimate? And they ignore all that. They completely cover over that because what they want is kind of a collective perspective. And by their standards and by my standards, there's no question that America is in decline. It's in decline on a global scale because it has no strategy, for example. And it has, the dynamism is going from America because we're banning the individualism that made it possible. But the remedy, my remedy, their remedy would be completely different. Of course, then they look at China and they say, look at China. China has real national ambition. And therefore, China is a real threat. Again, ignoring what those terms actually mean and what actually leads to success with regard to those terms. Anyway, it's an interesting story, even though I can't do it justice here. All right, so let's jump. We'll have to do a whole show about kind of national greatness and unpack the collectivism from what is really going on, from the common, ordinary perspective that both the left and the right seem to have, of a very collectivistic vision of America and a very collectivistic vision generally. All right, let's see. All right, just to remind you again, we do have a $250 goal. And so that would require everybody watching right now to do $3. $3 would get us to our goal. So I encourage you who get value out of the show and would like to show support for the show, $3, and that would really help us get to where we need to be. Thank you for those of you who are already contributing, but we need and can do better. All right, let's see. Update from Ukraine. A lot of news out of Ukraine because the Russians have really thrown everything they have, short of nuclear weapons, I think, right now, at Ukraine by UK intelligence estimates saying that basically the Russian now has 97% of its entire army in Ukraine, that it is throwing massive numbers of people on the eastern front of Ukraine in an attempt to capture ground. They are churning away. They are slowly taking ground inch by inch, but by throwing an enormous amount of troops at it. The 97% includes the new recruits that they recruited in the fall. So it includes a lot of untrained soldiers, a lot of people who are brand new, a lot of people who I think at this point are just dying in mass on the fields of Ukraine. There's a massive offensive going on. It might intensify next week, which will be the 1 year to the launch of this war. I think there's some effort by the Russian army to show some progress, some initiative, some move forward. We will see how this develops. Thousands and thousands and thousands of Russians and Ukrainians are dying on the battlefields right now. It is a slaughter that we might not have seen certainly since World War II, World War I, maybe World War I, given the inches that they're fighting over. It reminds me very much of the kind of World War I. The amount of artillery shells, the amount of just pure ammunition that is being expensed here is just, it's just unbelievable. Both Russia and Western Europe and the United States are actually struggling to keep up. And this is new in the news. We've known the Russians have a real problem in churning out enough ammunition to supply their own troops on the front line and to get more cruise missiles. And they had to buy drones from Iran, and they have to get ammunition and other supplies from the North Koreans, of all people. But the challenge the Western Europeans have in supplying the Ukrainians is a lot of Ukrainian weapon systems are old Russian weapon systems. And once they run out of shells, who's going to produce more shells? Now, Ukraine can to some extent, but it cannot match the consumption on the battlefield, which is massive. But even the new weapon systems that the Europeans and the Americans are providing for the Ukrainians, so much ammunition is being used that it is beyond the capacity of the Europeans to actually produce enough to supply the Ukrainians. Now, this suggests that NATO, and it turns out the United States, were massively unprepared for a ground war in Europe. I think the United States had pivoted towards the idea that it would never really ever be engaged in a conventional ground war again. The United States had pivoted to more fast special forces, special operations, maybe a quick invasion of Iraq, but then exit that doesn't involve massive amounts of ammunition like there is right now. And the United States has discovered that it has a real problem. We cannot, if we engaged in a ground war, I can't imagine ever engaging in a ground war with China, but if we ever had a Russia versus NATO ground war in Europe, the United States would struggle to supply the ammunition. I think the United States can ramp up production much faster than the Russians, much faster than any country in the world, as we saw in World War II, for example. But right now, we just don't have the reserves. And one of the lessons learned, I think, is at the Pentagon, is to dramatically increase the amount of ammunition, just pure ammunition, shells, bullets, things like that, rockets, missiles that we have. And I think you'll see this defense budget that Biden is going to submit. One of the reasons it will be the largest in American history will be because there'll be a big chunk of money there just to increase the reserves of this ammunition for a potential future ground war. Enemy unknown, enemy undetermined, but a potential nonetheless. So there's real panic, I think, in the U.S. around this. Just a little bit more on this. I mean, there are two Russian brigades. One of them a Marine brigade. Two of these brigades are some of the most, what do you call it, best trained soldiers. They've been decimated in the last few weeks. They're completely in tatters. And generally, it's not just that you're getting this information from Western sources. It's not just that Ukrainian officials and Western officials are talking about the complete devastation that is happening to the Russian army right now on the ground. But what's interesting about this, and part of this information, by the way, is coming from captured Russian soldiers, but you're getting this information, interestingly enough, from bloggers from Russia, military bloggers. So these are bloggers in Russia that write about military affairs, that are generally pro-Putin or think Putin's too weak, but that were very supportive of the war, very supportive of taking Ukraine, very supportive of capturing the whole country. In the beginning of the war, full of optimism, of belief that this was a doable mission, and that you've seen over the war their commentary become more and more and more pessimistic and more critical of the operation on the ground. There's massive criticism from these Russian military bloggers of Russian military tactics right now, of the Russian military leadership, of what is going on in the ground, and they are pulling their hair out with frustration over the inability of the Russian military to really advance and really take ground, and at the same time frustration with the fact that so much of the Russian military is just being decimated. All right, let's see. So yes, one of the stories is the Pentagon is reviewing its weapons stockpiles, and so on. So all right, I think we covered everything. Keep an eye out over the next 2 weeks. I think over the next 2 weeks we will know whether the Ukrainians can, the extent to which the Ukrainians can hold out against the Russians, the extent to which the Russians can push forward. They're really going to be, I think, throwing everything they have at this. I don't think they're holding much in reserve right now. Remember, they did launch the war in February, so they, for whatever reason, believe that February is a good month to fight, maybe because the ground in Ukraine is frozen. Spring is a difficult time because everything melts and you get mud, but right now you can advance. If they can't advance significantly, then I would expect at some point in the next couple of months a Ukrainian counteroffensive that picks up significant ground versus the Russians. Now, we will see. That's my, so I think a lot will be determined in the next 2 weeks in terms of kind of what happens later on, March, April, as Ukrainians, if you will, gear up for a counteroffensive and evaluate their prospects given the current situation. All right, finally, we'll end on a positive topic. Let's see, where did I have this info? It's gone. Oh, there it is. All right, so this year, for the first time in history, the entire genome of a single human being, a man named Leon Peshkin, is going to be released. It's the entire DNA sequence of a human being. This is going to be, I mean, this is obviously an amazing technical achievement. It's only 70 years ago that we, the double helix structure of DNA was first revealed. It's not that long ago that we managed to start sequencing the genome, DNA sequences. And at the time, I think it cost like $100 million to sequence the DNA of a human being. Today, it costs less than $1,000. I think this idea of an entire genome is going to revolutionize medicine soon. One of the things that we will be able to do is go get our entire genome sequenced. Our doctor will have that when assigning treatment to us. A significant consideration will be our particular structure of the genome, and so the impact of particular drugs given our genome, the particular treatments given the genome. Of course, this will enhance our ability to do gene therapy and gene treatments and figure out the impact that they have. I mean, this is a monumental event, a monumental time. I'm just about to finish a book on anti-aging. The name of the book just somehow escaped my mind. Anyway, Ageless. Ageless is the name of the book. I highly recommend it. It'll give you, again, kind of like the economy. It'll give you a sense of how complex this is, and how complex it is, how there are no one-off solutions. I think I prefer this book to kind of the stuff coming out of Sinclair and others that seem to present this as, oh, it's simple, extending human life, we'll just do this and this and this, just take this supplement. I think this book is presents a much more complex and thorough presentation of the science. It's called Ageless. Let me see the author. The author's name is Andrew Steele. It's not Lifespan, it's Ageless by Andrew Steele. I think it presents you with probably the best, most balanced, science-driven, trying to solve all problems with one little supplement, not trying to sell you anything, of all of them. So very balanced, very interesting, a real analysis of every single one of the proposals and every one of the areas in which there has been some progress in terms of life extension, in worms, in flies, in mice. I mean, there is a ton of science right now, a ton of science suggesting that we can extend life. But there's very little to suggest how for human beings. We know how to extend life for mice, all kinds of ways, some of them pretty disgusting, that you would never do to a human being. Like they actually sewing together and therefore create one circulatory system between young mice and old mice, young organs and old organs. So they share the organs, they share the blood, they share everything. Yes, if you could attach a young person to you, not doing that with human beings, right? So it's not just about taking the blood of young people and giving it to old people. It's about sharing organs too and everything. And it turns out that helps old mice. But obviously you can do that with mice and you can't do that with human beings. So highly recommend this. Shahzad asked, did Ageless book mention Dick Clark? I don't remember. It throws a lot of information at you, and I'm listening to it, so Dick Clark didn't stick, so I can't remember. But it covers everything. It seems to cover everything. Now it just came out, so you're not going to get the latest and greatest. If it just came out, it means it was written during 2020, 2021, so anything more recent will not be included. But it covers everything, and it's in that sense, it's very thorough. It has, I think, 10 different ways in which today we can extend life of an animal, but not extend human life yet, and how each one of those are connected to each other, and how that is related to the potential to extend human life in the future, which is super complicated and super difficult. He is very optimistic. Basically, his conclusion is, if you're under 40 years of age today, then you will see dramatic increases in life extension in the future. So too late for me, but for a lot of you guys, you could easily live well into your hundreds. He says that what the goal is to get to the point where every year discoveries are made that extend human life another year. And what that would make you is immortal, right? Because every year there's an extension of another year, and you're constantly being extended. So, but he doesn't rule that out, and it is again really interesting, thorough, non-gimmicky. I think so many of the books and the articles and the podcasts and the stuff about anti-aging is here's the pill. Here's the exercise regime. Here's the thing to do. And he's saying, wait a minute, the science is not quite clear. There's something here, but we really need to research this. The big study right now is there's a study going on, a big, large-scale study of metamorphin, something like that, the diabetes drug that seems to have some impact on aging, and there's a big study to measure aging, to measure biological age as you take this drug. And it's the first big, organized, real, scientific-based study on human beings with regard to a drug that could extend human life. So that would be terrific, because metformin, yes, metformin, John says. And that's exciting, because that's something, you know, if the results are positive, I could start taking, right? You could start taking it tomorrow. Well, this is a drug that's been used for a long time. It's been used diabetes. It's also a drug whose patent is expired, so you should be able to get this really, really cheap, really, really easily. And as a consequence, it could be something we could all start taking very soon that could add a few years to our life. So you need a lot more of those, of kind of real tests of this kind of stuff. All right, I have 3 Super Chat questions. And we're doing poorly on the Super Chat. So we're about $166 short. So a few $50 questions would solve that problem. Somebody jumping in with just a contribution like Theme Master just did for $20. Thank you, Theme Master. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Vladimir. Everybody in the chat right now doing $2 would get us there. So, you know, this is doable, but I've only got 3 questions before you stop. So hopefully we can make this happen. Ayrton asks, have you ever considered working in Fed? Does working in the Fed contradict with objectivism? Yeah, I think it does contradict with objectivism. I mean, my view is I would never take a job for the government that wouldn't exist in a free market. So I wouldn't take a job in the government for an illegitimate function of the government. And second, the only other condition I would take a job in the government is if it was an illegitimate entity like the Fed, only if I was in charge of winding this entity down, that is, getting the government out of doing something it shouldn't be doing. The Federal Reserve is a corrupt institution. I think me working at the Fed would have no impact on it. It's not like they're going to appoint me the governor, to lead the Fed. But even if they did, I would only take the job if my job was to unwind it. There's no job at the Fed. The Fed is a massive organization. It is the largest employer of PhDs in economics in the world. It's massive, and I don't think an objectivist could take a job at an organization like that. I don't think you'd have any impact, and I think you'd be just paid to sustain the status quo, and which is horrible. And what the Fed does is truly horrible. So I would only take the job if it meant unwinding what the Fed is doing, and nobody's going to give me that job. Nobody's going to appoint me to a meaningful Fed position. So Airtime, it's partially hypothetical because nobody would employ me at the Fed. Nobody would invite me to take that job. Okay. Oh wow, we're up to 100 people watching live. We got a number of new people just watching. You guys can support the show. $1.50 from everybody watching right now gets us over the hump and gets us to the 250 that is kind of needed in order to sustain these news shows. So if you like the news shows, if you value the news shows, if you get value from the news shows, please consider jumping in with a couple of bucks, at least. John says, Hong Kong just announced plans to be an international crypto hub and will allow citizens to trade crypto beginning June 1 without minimum investment. Could be cause of today's bump in price. Yes, but even there, you've got to take into account, and it might be the cause of the bump in price, but you got to take into account the fact that, at least for now, China has banned crypto completely, mining and trading and so on. So does this mean China is changing its mind because Hong Kong now is really under control of China? Is China changing its mind? Do we have any indication of that? Maybe. That would definitely be a positive for crypto if China changes its mind and China decides, given that the U.S. is doing everything in its power to kill the crypto industry, if China decides to embrace it as a competitive advantage, which would be smart of China to do. But there's no indication of mainland China changing its mind about crypto. Again, we will see. And if it isn't a sign that mainland China is changing its mind, how sustainable is it for Hong Kong to do it? What happens when China decides to shut down exchanges in Hong Kong? What happens when China decides that having all this trading going on in Hong Kong is having some kind of negative effect on the Chinese economy or Chinese ability to sustain power, sustain its influence? So again, even though if it's real, and if China was independent, if Hong Kong was independent, and Hong Kong could make these kind of decisions independent of China, and it was sustainable, then yes, that would be good news. But given the uncertainty around China, Hong Kong, and all of that, one has to really wonder, whether all of this, whether the movement makes sense or not. Generally, it's almost never the case that something going up in one day by 10% makes sense. So that's just generally my view. A big jump of 1% in something usually is indicative of a bubble, something that is not necessarily justified by any real events in the world out there. 10% is a lot. But we know Bitcoin goes up a lot, Bitcoin goes down a lot. Jenkins wants to correct something I said about Bitcoin. He said Bitcoin is strongly correlated with the NASDAQ and still is. I think it is. I mean, one day certainly doesn't reduce that correlation, but it never has been a percentage. Yes, it doesn't have a beta of 1. It tends to have a beta of 2 maybe. It has a very high beta. That is, Bitcoin, for every movement of the NASDAQ, Bitcoin tends to move more. That is, the movement of Bitcoin tends to be an exaggerated movement of the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ, though, today, even though I agree with Jenkins, it's wrong to say that one day makes a pattern, but Bitcoin today is up a lot. The NASDAQ is down a little bit. That is uncorrelated, but that's just one day, and it's still true that the long-term movement of Bitcoin is highly correlated to the NASDAQ. At least it has been over the last year and a half. We will see, or maybe longer. We will see if that continues or not. There's also, Bitcoin has also been correlated with low interest rates, with zero interest rates, because that allows for massive liquidity and people chasing yield and chasing speculative assets. It's why NASDAQ went up a lot during zero interest rate. NASDAQ today responded to the fact that interest rates are probably going up. Bitcoin responded opposite to the idea that interest rates going up, maybe because of Hong Kong, maybe because of something else. But as I said, I'm curious about the fact that crypto indexes are going up, not just Bitcoin. Bitcoin could have been going up as a real fleet of quality, given the struggles that pretty much every other crypto business is having out there with the government. All right, we're exactly halfway. We're at exactly $125. That's kind of funny. We rarely hit the exact number. Okay, Bree says, I refinanced my company's variable rate debt to long-term fixed rate in 2021. Brilliant, Bree. I mean, you caught it right at the best time. I'm not a high-paid financial expert. Why didn't these big companies see this coming? I don't know. I don't understand it. Maybe, and this is something to consider, maybe nobody would give them long-term fixed rate debt because of the nature of the company. One of the things about companies that are struggling is that they probably couldn't get the debt in a fixed rate thing. The real question is, Bree, why didn't the U.S. government do that? I mean, I know that John Cochrane and others were vehemently arguing that the government should be refinancing all its debt with 30-year bonds when 30-year bonds were, I can't remember, what, 2%, something like that, instead of allowing them to keep doing this in, 6-month, 1 year, 2-year bonds, which are incredibly sensitive to changes in interest rates. So the federal government just exposed itself as completely ignorant and stupid by not. I mean, the UK government once in a while in its history has issued 100-year bonds, which makes an enormous amount of sense because then you know exactly what you're going to pay into the future. And when interest rates went down and were almost zero, that was the time to issue 100-year bonds and to finance your government with 100-year bonds rather than this ridiculous constant refinancing. But yes, so brilliant move, Bree. The rest of the world should have followed whatever you were doing. All right, Gail says, do you think dwindling freedom hinders life extension science? Of course. I mean, we would be 20 years ahead in the life extension science if we didn't have the FDA and a whole multitude of restrictions and dwindling freedom and limited resources because the government allocates funding and the government, life extension is not a priority for government in terms of funding these kind of things. So it is a headwind, a significant headwind. However, I think that the science is advancing in spite of that headwind. There are committed scientists, and there's a growing movement, if you will, of people willing to lobby government, willing to try to change the attitude of the FDA, willing to kind of push the envelope and to try to get government to lay off and to let this industry achieve its potential. So I'm going to stay optimistic here and say that there's a lot of upside, but yes, it could be a lot better. Apollo Zoo says, did you watch ARC UK interview with cardiologist Cristina Leport and her diet recommendations for cardio health? I did not. I know Cristina Leport very well. I did not see that. I do not follow ARC UK. I just can't. I don't follow anybody. I just don't have time to listen to all these other podcasts and hard enough just to produce my own. Yes, I mean, I've had a lot of discussions with Cristina over the years about proper diets and what's required. And again, I would encourage everybody to read Ageless because I think he talks about diet there and he talks about what's required in a kind of balanced, rational way without saying, oh, go paleo, what is it now, carnivore diet, that is it, you'll live much longer. Where there's really very little science behind any of these diets as prolonging human life. But, we need real research. We need real data. We need real information about these things. So again, Ageless is a good resource for that. Christina's very smart and very knowledgeable, so she's definitely also a resource for these things. I think I, though, went off pasta way before Cristina did. That's the one thing I'll say. Philip, what's your take on claims made by Seymour Hersh, according to whom Nord Stream 2 was blown up by U.S. Navy divers? I haven't seen his particular argument about that, but the reality is that I don't think Seymour Hersh has any more information than the rest of us. I don't know on what basis he is claiming that. I could tell you tomorrow that I think that it was all done by Norwegian divers in order to increase Norwegian revenues from natural gas. But it's all arbitrary, right? So I'm curious what actual information, what actual knowledge Seymour Hersh has and how reliable it is and how good it is and how good Seymour Hersh is generally at, explaining these kind of phenomena and telling us these phenomena. So is he any better at other stuff? And allow me to be skeptical given his history. I don't see where the data comes from and where the information comes from. He has a long track record of accurately predicting stuff. He's obviously has a long track record because he's 80, he's well into his 80s, right? So he has a long track record, but I find it, very unlikely that the U.S. would do it, but maybe. Not impossible. Not impossible. But there are only so many countries that can actually pull something like this off. So guessing the United States is pretty high probabilities because the reality is that it's either the U.S. or it's the Russians or it's a few other countries that have the capability. There's just not that many countries that have the capability of doing it. But I will check out his story and see on what he bases it on and give an opinion after that. For today's show, especially with Alex tonight, I have to work, so contributing now should be great again. Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate it. Jeff has brought us within $39 of our goal. If somebody wants to put in $40 and just get us over the hump, that'd be great. But in any case, it's already an hour, which is longer than I want these shows to be. I will see you all tonight with Alex Epstein. Don't forget, 7 p.m. East Coast time. Should be a terrific show. All things energy, all things future of energy. And we will talk also another one of these news roundups we will have tomorrow morning. So I will see you, and then so tonight, tomorrow morning, and then Saturday at 2 p.m. East Coast time. Those are the next 3 shows. After that, who knows? I'll be traveling, doing shows from the road whenever I can, whenever I find a place and I have the time. Have a great